Sveiki, mėlyjeji. Šiandien taip jau sutarėm su Vincentu, kad naujausios tinklalaidės įvadą padarysiu aš. Myliu šią vietą, jin man primena senas sausio 13 kovas, kai mes apgynėm savo laisvę ir bandom ją ginti toliau. Tai šiandien tinklalaidėje su mumis kalbės vienas iš geriausių mano draugų, ambasadorius Kurtas Volkeris, kažkada prie prezidento Bušo padėjęs Bušui apsispręsti dėl NATO plėtros į Baltijos šalis, dirbęs ambasadoriumi prie NATO, kuris gan pozityviai kalba apie šią savaitę vykusį prezidento Zelenskio ir Trumpo susitikimą Vašingtone. Net kai kurie analitikai lygina, kad pažiūrėjus rezultatus, ką Izraelio premjeras pasiekė Vašingtone su prezidentu Zelenskiu, akivaizdi Zelenskio pergalė, jo dominavimas, ypač palyginant su ta drama, kurią matėme prieš gerus metus Baltųjų rūmų ovalinėme kabinete. Įdomu tai, kad Vencas, viceprezidentas, net nebuvo pakviestas į tą susitikimą su Zelenskiu, nors jisai buvo susitikime su premjeru Netanjahu. Manoma, kad tai yra ir tam tikros Venco izoliacionistinės politikos pabaiga. Trumpas artėja prie Ukrainos, Trumpas artėja prie mūsų. Pažiūrėsime, ar tai baigsis gerais pranešimais ir dėl JAV karių Lietuvoje. Bet kokiu atveju atsiveria naujas langas Amerikoje. Gal ir pavyks rugsėjo mėnesį patvirtinti naują stiprių sankcijų paketą Rusijai. Gal ir pavyks po trupučiuką įsiūbuoti Ameriką esminiam sprendimui, kurio laukiame nuo pat 2008 metų Bukarešto NATO susitikimo, pakviesti Ukrainą į NATO, kas užbaigtų bet kokius konfliktus mūsų teritorijoje. Tačiau čia, kad ir tas langas atsiveria, dėja su apgailestavimu galime konstatuoti, kad mūsų raudonieji žiūri visai kitą pusę. Mūsų raudonieji susikoncentravę į ką? Į pagrindinį lemiamą karo įgalintoją Rusijos prieš Ukrainą, tai yra Pekiną, į pagrindinį Amerikos priešą, su kuriuo santykius vystyti, tai yra tas pats, kas iš esmės kita ranka gadinti savo santykius su Amerika. Todėl šią savaitę aš išsiunčiau daug formalių klausimų Kęstučiui Budriui, klausdamas, kaip tai paveiks mūsų strateginė partnerystė su Amerika, kurią pasirašėm pirmieji Europoje dėl Indijos ir Ramiojo vandenyno viso regiono, kaip tai paveiks santykius su Amerika. Ar Budrys turi kokį nors planą Amerikai? Tie patys žmonės, kurie jam atidarė duris Amerikoje, yra labai sunerimę, matydami mūsų normalizavimą santykių su pagrindiniu Amerikos priešu Kinija. Tai kokį planą mes turim Amerikai? Ar mes žinome, ko iš tikrųjų iš mūsų nori Kinija? Nejaugi mes pasiruošę įleisti Kiniją, kaip kažkada iki Skvernelio laikų, dar Butkevičiaus laikais, į savo strateginius sektorius, nepaisant visų nacionalinio saugumo grėsmių, kaip tai paveiks mūsų santykius ne tik su Amerika, bet ir su visais Amerikos draugais, tam pačiam Indijos ir Ramiojo vandenyno pasaulyje, ir kokia iš mūsų ekonominė nauda. Jau šiandien prekyba su Kinija yra atstatyta, mes norime dar didesnio disbalanso, mes norime, kad mūsų pramonė dar labiau užsilenktų, kaip jinai užsilenkinėja Vokietijoje, mes norime suskaldyti Europą, šį kartą jau Kinijos rankomis, kaip kažkada raudonieji stengdavosi padėti Rusijai ją skaldyti. Tai daug neatsakytų klausimų. Galų gale, ką mes darysime su Baltarusija per mūsų pirmininkavimą, nejaugi čia bus dar viena gėda, kurią turėsime patirti, kai mes sankcijų didžiausiam nusikaltėliui Lukašenkai, kurį Zelenskis net į prokuratūrą nori priduoti už genocidą, už karo nusikaltimus, o mes, matai, vyriausybės programai toliau vardojame žodžius, jeigu jis toliau Lukašenka rems rusus, tai gal mes ir toliau jį bausime. Primenu, kad genocidui ir karo nusikaltimams negalioja jokie laiko pribojimai ir tas jeigu yra tiesiog nežmogiškas. Tai pažiūrėsime, Pažiūrėsime, ką į tai atsakys Kęstutis Budrys. O pratęsiant visas šitas diskusijas ir tas mintis, kurias ambasadorius Kurtas Volkeris jums netrukus išdėstyt, aš jūs asmeniškai kviečiu atvykti rytoj į Kauną. 18 val. BLC verslo centre, Donelaičio 60, mes kartu su Laurynu Kasčiūnu, kuris kūrė visos Europos gynybos politiką, kartu su Andrium Kubilium, taip pat su premjeru Aleksandru Abišala, kuris garsėja savo strateginiu mąstymu. Mes visi galvosime, tarsimės kartu su kauniečiais, tai ar Europa gali ir kiek gali apsiginti pati. Na, mano analizė, kaip buvusio ambasadoriaus Vašingtone, kad Amerikos mums reikės dar mažiausiai 10 metų, kad ir kiek Europa tą savo šarvą augintųsi, tačiau žinoma, Amerika mėgsta stipriausius. Tai Europa turi sustiprėti iki įmanomo savo lygio, bet mes kartu turime daryti viską, kad prilaikytų Ameriką. Paminėjau su Kurtu Čerčilį. Kažkada Čerčilis, visa Britų istorija įrodė. Mes galbūt vieni kaip Europa galėtume kurį laiką atsilaikyti, tačiau jeigu mes norime nugalėti priešą, jeigu norime pašalinti visas grėsmes, mums reikia Amerikos. Šiandien priešas Rusija veikia kartu su komunistinė Kinija, kartu su visais idiotais Irane, komunistai, islamistai, viso pasaulio blogiukai yra susivienyje. Tai jeigu mes galvojam, kad mes vieni tas grėsmes galėsime atremti, mes klystame. Mes turime būti fronto linija, laisvės fronto linija ir mums reikia labai aktyviems, kad išlaikyt ne tik Europą apginkluotą, bet ir Ameriką kartu su mumis. Apie visą tai mūsų tinklalaidėje ir dar kartą primenu, Kaunas, pirmadienis, 18 val. BLC verslo centras, lauksime jūsų. Kalbėkime apie tai kartu ir ieškokime tų išeičių kartu. Iki, sudie, laimėsim. Vincentas, you start the show and then we follow.
All right. Welcome once again to both our listeners and our wonderful guest today to the new Lithuanian America episode this week. Kurt Volker is now a long-time friend of the podcast. It's I believe the third or even fourth time we're having you on. As always, it's a huge pleasure and to hear all the great things that you have to say. It's very inspiring, and actually it gives us a lot of ideas how to keep Lithuania and the free world as a whole afloat. So first of all, welcome back. To jump in straight away.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's great to have you. So jumping in straight away, in Lithuania, we like to look at things that are going on in America, and perhaps through a really optimistic lens, but what we're seeing in America seems quite positive. We're cautiously positive about these things, especially when it comes to the sanctions package that, God rest his soul, Lindsey Graham has been trying to adopt for about a year and a half, and it finally looks like it might happen. What's your take on it? Do you think it'll finally actually pass the threshold and will be adopted? Because this would be a game changer.
Right. So yes, thank you very much. I agree with your overall assessment that things are moving in a positive direction with respect to Ukraine, with respect to Lithuania's interests, with respect to NATO. So yeah, they're moving in a good direction. Specifically about this legislation, I believe it will pass. They did some procedural voting in the Senate yesterday. There's tremendous support. Now, what does passage mean? Nobody can really tell you right now what it means. It is symbolic. It is a message to Putin that President Trump has green-lighted the legislation, and 2/3 plus of the Senate supports it. So that's a good message. I had a conversation yesterday at Lindsey Graham's funeral service with Senator Joni Ernst, and she was not exactly 100% sure what's going to be in the final version. And so they're still trying to figure this out. a big part of this legislation has always rested on tariffs, which are tariffs on countries that engage in trade in oil and gas with Russia. Well, tariffs, first off, are not always effective. Second, you can open up a can of worms with tariffs that we end up backing down from, as we did with China once when we imposed 100% tariffs on China, then realized that hurts us more than them. It has substantial presidential waiver authority for national security reasons embedded in the legislation. So Trump has discretion as to how to apply these things. And some of the key issues that experts have recommended to the Senate, particularly are on secondary sanctions in oil and gas trade, and particularly within that, the financial institutions that make the payments for the oil and gas trade. You go after those and you would have a real impact. But that's not currently part of the legislation, but it could become part of the legislation. It's possible. And if it passes the Senate finally, it still has to be passed by the House. They're out of session until the end of August. This House version may not be the same identical version that was passed by the Senate. Could be, but it might not be, in which case it goes to reconciliation between the House and the Senate. And it's in that process of amendments to the Senate bill, changes in the House before it's passed in the House, or in reconciliation, that you could see adjustments to the things that I just talked about. How much does it rely on tariffs? How much does it rely on secondary sanctions? Does it target particularly oil and gas trade and the financial transactions surrounding the oil and gas trade? And in doing this, do you maintain President Trump's support and a veto-proof majority in the Senate? So those are, I know it's complicated. I know viewers want an easy solution. It's never works that way in Washington in the Congress. But your bottom line, getting back to where we started, is that this is positive. This is moving in the right direction. It is a signal to Putin, and it reinforces a different trend or a similar trend that we've seen simply in President Trump's own rhetoric and behavior, where he had a very positive meeting with Zelensky in Ankara. Of course, Zelensky was invited to Ankara, Putin was not. That's good on Erdogan's part for doing so. He offered licensing of Patriot missile production in Ukraine as part of that Ankara meeting. It's a very big step to do that. They had follow-up discussions on Patriots in the White House yesterday. So those things are all moving the right way. Final thing I'll say is positive. When President Trump sat down with President Zelensky at Ankara, the first thing he said was, "I like this guy." That is a very important signal to the MAGA movement in the United States, that it's okay to like Zelensky, it's okay to support Ukraine. Because a lot of the machinery, a lot of the talking around MAGA has just inherently been pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian. And Trump is signaling, I'm not there. That's very important.
Can I just ask on this bipartisan element? Because my embassy is reporting that, well, the problem this time might be actually with Democrats who said, we will not vote. And, I'm kind of angry because when we had problems with Republicans playing the Russian card, then Democrats, they were accusing them of playing, Russian card, actually. But now, just because of internal politics, because of course they want to win a house, they might, can we really block this, Graham bill, that was stuck on the House for, on the Hill for more than 1 year? Or you think we will still have some normal Democrats who would say, okay, this is your party line, but, I'm for Ukraine. This is your story.
This is another great insider's question, because on the one hand, 2/3 of the House or more will support this legislation. They want to see this package go through. But how do you get that voted on? that's tough because Republicans do not like to pass legislation with Democratic votes. They want to pass it on their own. Democrats will be very happy to oppose this legislation, some of them, on other grounds. Say, oh, I support Ukraine, I oppose Russia, I want to see it. However, we want to have sanctions on Israel as well, or we want to have something for the Palestinians, or we want to have something about war powers in Iran because we don't like what Trump is doing on Iran. Or we don't like tariffs. We have to take the tariffs out and do only secondary sanctions. So I can see any number of things that would poison this legislation if they're introduced by Democrats that would have to then be stopped. And that makes it much more of a partisan vote. And as you know, the Republicans in the House only have a couple of seats, majority, 2 or 3 seats right now. And you can't lose anybody if you're going to pass the legislation. But on this, you might lose some people from the MAGA world. You only need to lose 2 or 3, and you don't have a Republican majority. And then you've got to have the votes of the Democrats, the majority of Democrats coming in behind it. And how the speaker feels and acts in putting forward legislation that is not the Republican majority, but is a bipartisan majority, that's tricky. So I think this will likely get done. I think it will likely get there, but these are, as you're highlighting, these are some of the stumbling blocks along the way.
But if I may, sanctions isn't. We're talking about sanctions here, and they are very important. I mean, we're seeing the effect of Ukrainian long-range sanctions as well as the actual institutional sanctions that are being put across by both the EU and the US, even though they could be tougher in many cases. But we also need to talk about material on the ground that, especially with regards to Patriot missile systems. I mean, hell, I've been in Ukraine many times in the past couple of years, usually during the summer, and I spent a lot of time in Kyiv, which always felt very safe, even though it's the main target, because it's completely surrounded by Patriot systems, Patriot batteries. Mm-hmm. Up until now, that's why Kyiv has been safe. Now they're out of ammunition, and now, ostensibly, since Ankara, the Americans are going to give the Ukrainians the license to build them. Obviously, it's not perfect. We'd love for the Americans to give actual Patriot missiles to the Ukrainians, but fine, they're building it themselves. But is that actually going to happen? Is this another one of these sort of moments of, sure, we'll give you whatever you want, leave us alone, but they're not, Trump and his administration, are they actually going to follow through with this? Is it going to happen?
Yeah. So you raised several good points in sentence, and so I want to address them in turn. The first is that 70 to 80% of the ammunition and weapons that Ukraine needs for the war, Ukraine produces itself. And these are largely the drones and the explosives that go with the drones and the counter-drone systems and the electronic warfare systems and so forth. They're doing very, very well. It's night and day compared to where we were in February 22 and where we are today with what Ukraine can produce for its own defense. So that's number one. The big gap, in fact, the only big gap, is air defense systems capable of taking out missiles, cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. This Ukraine cannot produce on its own right now. The US has this system, the Patriot system. There are a few other systems out there that are somewhat capable, but none as good as the Patriot. And Ukraine needs these. And as you say, there's a lack of the interceptor missiles now. They have the systems, but they don't have the missiles to use. And that has created a heightened vulnerability for Kyiv and other major cities. And Russia is succeeding at hitting some targets in ways that they were not succeeding before. So that's a problem. Then you have the US saying to Ukraine, we'll let you build them. We'll give you a license. You can build them. That's a huge step. I mean, that is, don't take that lightly, because the thing the U.S. worries a lot about is tech transfer to the Russians or the Chinese. And we don't want that to happen. But so to take the step and say, okay, but we're going to actually let the technology go to Ukraine. We'll be with them. We'll be building together. We'll supervise this, but we can build there. That's a big deal. Now, this also helps the United States. This is why I think this will happen. We have proven that we cannot scale up Patriot missile production in any effective way. Our factories are maxed. We have state and local regulations. We have environmental groups. We have difficulties galore in ramping up production. So getting it out of the United States to a place where the result is what matters as quickly as possible, that's actually going to work. And then you're going to produce Patriot missiles. And that would be Ukraine. And so I think the US will do this. And we need the Patriot missiles. And so, the bad news is that we have prioritized ourselves over Ukraine or anybody else. We prioritize US forces. The Gulf allies need them. Israel needs them. European allies need some. And there just aren't enough. There simply aren't enough to go around. So it's a good thing for the US that there will be increasing production. I think Ukraine is quite capable of doing it under a license. They're already producing missiles. It's a matter of getting the right components and the right software. So I think that this will actually happen. I would even go further and say, I think it'll happen faster than people think. I think that you hear experts say, oh, it'll take a year to, get production going and get them in. I don't think so. I think it's going to take Ukraine 2 to 3 months once they have a system set up.
Kurt, can I ask a bit more strategic question? Actually, yesterday, I again watched the documentary about Churchill at war, how he convinced Roosevelt finally to engage. It took some time. And I was thinking, well, is Zelensky will be the leader that finally gets America to re-engage with Ukraine? Because Ukraine was always a problem in American policy.
Yes.
Kiev speech to, we remember Bucharest NATO summit and so on. But looking far away, okay, not so much to the future, but midterm future, when I read Ankara statement, especially this sentence about Ukrainian contribution, like old, Fox diplomat, I thought, well, is it a preparation for Ukrainian invitation to NATO? Because it looks like that if you just read the document. So my question to you, because I raised the same question with David Kramer 1 week ago, do you think we, as all fans of Ukrainian NATO membership, see again a slim chance of Republicans and maybe even Democrats coming back to Ukrainian NATO membership issue? In case, look, let's take the best scenario. Ukraine is winning the war, you are creating production together. And then, so why not to invite them to NATO?
Yeah. So, my view is that Ukrainian NATO membership is the only long-term scenario that makes any sense. It doesn't make sense to have differentiated security arrangements in Europe, where you have weaker guarantees for the stronger party and stronger guarantees for the weaker parties. This makes no sense. Everybody needs to be all in, all for one. And that's what works. It's what worked for 75 plus years and still works today. That's where we end up. Now, you raised the question this way. You asked, is Zelensky going to be the leader that gets the United States on board? I'm going to say it the other way around. Is Trump going to be the leader that brings this about? Or is it going to be what happens naturally once Trump is gone? That's what we don't know. I think the trend line here is clear. Russia has to be defeated enough that we have deterrence. So no more active fighting They don't want to break it, and we don't want to break it, so we have deterrence. Once we have that, we have to solidify that, and that's what Ukrainian membership would do. Now, President Trump is quite capable of changing his mind on any subject at any time. So it could be that he'll be railing against NATO and railing against NATO enlargement for Ukraine until there's a defeat for Russia and there's a border. And then he says, okay, let's do it now. It's quite possible. Not my expectation, though. My expectation is that he will still see that as too much for Putin. And Putin needs a way out. And so it would just be a ceasefire. But then after Trump is gone, and after we have a period of ceasefire and stability, I can very well see Republicans and Democrats coming together and saying, let's go forward with this. Ukraine, as we said earlier, but Ukraine will be an incredibly capable military, a very large country, a contributor to European security as a whole, a defense innovator in ways that we have not been. So we need the technology from them as well. So I think that will inevitably happen. It's just whether Trump is the one to make it happen or whether it waits for a new administration.
I mean, actually, you raise a very good point in a very roundabout way about Trump's, let's put it nicely, ability to change or to turn around on a dime, right? If at the beginning of his second term, we had these horror movie images from the Oval Office where him and J.D. Vance were bullying Zelensky, now we have something completely opposite to that, right? With Trump, as you said, calling Zelensky a guy that he likes in Ankara. So, I mean, trying to bring this to a more Baltic perspective, that's what we're grappling with as well. We want to keep the Americans on our side, to fulfill the promises that Bush Jr. made when he was in Vilnius, right? Anybody who should make an enemy of Lithuania makes an enemy of America. I mean, this is what we try to live up to, and we want to keep you guys on side with this as well. So what's the strategy? How did Zelensky manage to I guess, turn things around with Trump, and how should we do the same?
Yes. So the short answer to the question is nothing succeeds like success. And so that's part of the answer is Ukraine has, through its own resilience, determination, innovation, performance, integrity, delivered. They have developed in a way that is impressive. And so they look like they're winning and Putin looks like he's losing. So that's one part of the answer is to how that happened. But I want to go back to that meeting a year and a half ago in the Oval Office and be very clear that I think Zelensky screwed that up. And I've said this publicly before, but I'll say it again for your podcast. President Trump was needling him a little bit, but it was okay. There was nothing bad. They were getting together. And Trump says, okay, let's go to lunch. At that moment, J.D. Vance speaks up and says, well, I just want to underscore here, I think what President Trump is doing is incredibly important. No president has ever tried diplomacy here. We're going to see if we can settle this. J.D. Vance did that because he had not been on camera the entire 45 minutes before that in the meeting. And he wanted to be seen as part of the meeting. So he speaks up. President Zelensky at that moment should have said, thank you very much, JD, let's go eat. And instead, he gets into an argument with JD Vance. And then he argues, Vance argues, the president comes in and defends JD Vance. And then Zelensky is trying to talk over the president at the same time that the president's talking. This was an absolute disaster, and Zelensky should have known better and not done that. J.D. Vance is not his counterpart. He doesn't need to argue with him in public. He doesn't need to convince J.D. Vance. He should take the president's cue and say, okay, we've had a nice talk. Let's go have lunch. That was the right thing to have done, and he didn't do it, and it really screwed things up for a while. When Zelensky and Trump sat down again at Pope Francis's funeral about 6 weeks later, They sorted everything out. That, I'm sure, they both felt terrible. That is not the meeting they wanted to have had, but it is the meeting they had. And so they had to reset that. And they did reset that. And President Zelensky has since been very smart and disciplined in the way he engages with President Trump. He doesn't talk over him. He's not trying to convince him. He's always saying thank you. He's not making big demands in public. He saves the substantive discussion for the private meeting. He has handled that relationship now very, very well. That's what it takes to actually do a meeting like that successfully. So on the one hand, yes, Ukraine turning the tide of the war is a big deal. But on the other, it is also Zelensky learning a little bit how to deal with President Trump.
Kurt, can I just continue on Vincentas' line? Because he's asking for good reason. To be honest, for last year or so, not only in Lithuania, I would say in the Baltic states, even in Europe, at European level, those transatlantic people like we are, we seriously strategically think how to deter the divorce with America, because we want you, like we existentially want you in. For example, my party leader Kashunas, together with my former boss, also party leader Kubilius, they're building this European defense, But even we will have soon debate in one of our cities in Kaunas about that. Okay, we can do it, but we can do it up to some level. And still, even if we try very, very hard for at least 10 years, we will need Americans in case we have a war. So the minimum program is to keep Americans at least 10 years or more. Tell me, Kurt, Ukraine is big. They have huge potential, economic, military. I am just small, but big fan of America. What can we do to, invest into our marriage even stronger? Should we act like Baltic states together? One of the ideas is that we discussed with Urmas and Salo, we are too small, let's do it together, financing some think tanks together, some media hubs, making military projects together with Americans. Or we have to, one of the big debates in Lithuania right now was it really worth to do this Taiwan turn? Because part of my red government thinks, well, in this world, maybe we have to normalize relations with China. We say, no. We have to keep that Indo-Pacific line. This is where, for Americans, it is important. We have some other priorities like that we're using. Let's help Americans in Western Hemisphere because, Cuba is important. They want to get rid of that red dictatorship there. So looking very much to decade or 2 decades ahead, Kurt, because you created us together with President Bush, how to keep that Bush type of love in America for the Baltics. Like, I'm now speaking not as, the head of, United Volker, I'm speaking now like Lithuanian representative. How to keep people like you with us?
Yeah, well, my belief, Ziggy, is that kind of Reagan-esque, Bush 43, national security oriented, freedom oriented part of thinking, that is the center of gravity of the Republican Party. The MAGA part of the Republican Party has become very loud, very influential because of President Trump. And, it's a factor, we have to recognize it, but it's not the center of gravity. And that, to me, when we have another election cycle or two, we have midterms in a few months, and then we have presidential election in 28, you're going to see that center of gravity stays where it is. That's where people are. And I think we even see now, as we were just talking about earlier with President Trump and with the Senate, that center of gravity is becoming more visible and more powerful again. That's just because it is the bigger thing. And I didn't mention Laura Loomer, but Laura Loomer, who is a podcaster herself, traveled to Ukraine. She's been very critical of Ukraine and very pro-Putin in the past, and she's completely changed her mind on this. That, I think, is a reflection of the fact that the MAGA world went too far, and it made less and less sense, and the center of gravity is real. And she has shifted. I think Trump has shifted. I just think that's the way that will be. Now, that's the positive side. That's what I see. We will need a candidate. So it's one thing to talk about structural trends, but then when it's an election, it's always about a candidate. Who is that candidate going to be, and what will they say? You have to assume today that the most likely candidate for the Republicans in 28 is J.D. Vance, but it's not guaranteed. Could be Marco Rubio. Could be somebody completely from outside the current administration, former governor or something. So we just don't know where this is going, but that candidate is then going to be the one that is defining the tone and the terms for that period, and is going to have to build the coalition that keeps the center of gravity Republicans and the MAGA Republicans on the same ticket. So that's where we'll go.
Wonderful. Well, it seems that every time that we have you on the show, you bring a sort of ray of positivity into our cautiously or rather pessimistic world. So thank you very much for coming on, and then we hope to have you on again soon.
It's great to see you both. Thank you for having me, and all the best to Lithuania.
Thank you. And we will keep inviting you to our podcast and to Lithuania.
Yes,
always, because we still believe that, as you said, Republicans are with us, and it just takes time to make the right decisions.
Yes, keep cultivating NBA players. That'll help.
Okay, just last question, really, Kurt, on this Indo-Pacific, because I'm trying to argue with our government today, saying, guys, don't think that, few calls or few visits to China or vice versa makes China friend of America. China is the biggest long-term threat to America.
Correct.
So let's stand with Americans, rallying the friends of America against communist aggression. So this line keeps, despite the political changes.
Thank you for raising that again, Ziggy. I should have addressed that. President Trump is going to host President Xi for a state dinner sometime this autumn. He does not want to get into a war with China. But don't misread this. This is President Trump and the both sides, both political parties in Washington, recognizing that China is the biggest long-term challenge or threat to the United States. And we know that we are going to have to face this in every domain, in AI, in chips, in technology, in space, you name it. You name it, we're going to have to face that. But the tactics are going to be, we're going to try to talk. We're going to try to set boundaries so we don't end up in a war with each other. We're going to try to push timelines out into the future. But don't mistake that for thinking that China is our friend or that we expect things to just be great.
Perfect. That was the message I wanted to hear, and because what I try to underline in America's national interest about America is still very important. Despite all the big fights, you are still the most strategic democracy, arsenal of democracy, as Roosevelt was also saying. So let's keep in that way. Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Very good.
See you.
Thank you.
In
Thank you,
all
Ziggy.
world. places. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Take care.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Take care.